Good day from Banjo Dunk Production Studio in Toronto, Canada. An audiobook podcast based on my book, My Good Times with Stompin Tom. I'm your host, Duncan Fremlin from the band Whiskey Jack. Chapter 5. An Offer I Couldn't Refuse. The best times with Tom were our one-on-one in his workshop, studio, furnace room at his house outside Toronto. It was here in this room that the Whiskey Jack and Stompin Tom Connor's music collaboration became official. I remember one Sunday in particular. It was a lazy fall afternoon in 1992. I had called a few days before and asked if he was up for a visit. As it turns out, when I arrived, there was no one else there. Tom Jr. had moved to town, so it was just me and the empty nesters, Tom and his wife Lena. That was a rare treat. I was going to have him all to myself. The chessboard came out, and we talked about everything. Many of the stories I share in my stage show originated that afternoon. There were Hank Snow stories, tales about Wilf Carter and many of his other contemporaries, country stars who inspired him to become the man that he became. Somehow our talk drifted to world religions, of which he knew a great deal. He liked, perhaps even needed to know things. It was the not knowing that seemed to bother him. If someone told a joke that he didn't get, it seemed to bother him. For instance, we were all sitting around one afternoon between shows on the 1993 tour when our bass player Greg Street told this joke. What do you get when you cross a dyslexic with an agnostic insomniac? Answer: someone who stays up all night wondering if there is a dog. At first, Tom didn't understand the joke. He got very upset. Later, that became funnier than the joke. Down in the furnace room, Brian Mulroney was a hot topic that afternoon. His tenure as Prime Minister was coming to an end, and none too soon as far as Tom was concerned. The cozy up to America policies that Mulroney had promoted got under Tom's skin. According to Tom and many of his fans, the North American Free Trade Agreement, January 1st, 1989, was selling out Canadian sovereignty to American interests. The proponents of the agreement, who were heavily financed by American-based corporations, told us we'd suffer financially if we didn't vote for it. The opponents, of which I was one and so was Tom, thought that allowing international corporations free access to our markets would, in the long term, be disastrous. Bashing Mulroney was a recurring theme that played out in Tom's music and live shows over the following years. There's no doubt the Mulroney policies that rankled him so much inspired some great songs. Believe in Your Country was one of the best. We were in the studio, me standing at the banjo mic listening to the track, when I heard Tom sing, "If you don't believe your country should come before yourself, you can better serve your country by living somewhere else." Holy crap, I thought. That's rather draconian. No room for speculation there. That was Tom. After laying down my banjo track, I returned to the control room to listen to the mix, and standing there was the world-famous accordionist, Walter Ostanek. Walter has earned 21 Grammy Award nominations and has won 3. I was in the presence of greatness. Tom introduced us and then asked Brian Hewson, the engineer, to play the track. Walter had just arrived and was hearing it for the first time. He was effusive about the living somewhere else line. At that time, there were many Canadians who were feeling this way. The other Mulroney policy that eventually failed also pissed him off in a big way. The Meech Lake Accord that would have granted Quebec distinct society status also gave Tom and the country a lot of grief. One of the songs we got from that ire was Johnny Maple. Later that night we recorded, "My name is Johnny Maple and they'll never make no laws that'll keep me from my little Quebecois." I was at first surprised by Tom's interest in international affairs. For a man with no formal education, he was knowledgeable in areas that many PhD types are not. I had never met anyone with such a propensity to challenge himself as Tom. He told me he thought his brain was a muscle and it needed to be exercised, so he'd find something difficult to memorize, just for fun. The afternoon flew by. After a few hours and numerous chess games, all won by him, I was about to leave when he asked me if I'd like to drive to town for Chinese food. "Sure," I replied, and a few minutes later, we were on our way. As I approached the Suburban, Tom pointed to the front passenger's door and said, "Sit there, Dunk." I turned around and saw Lena getting into the back seat. As Tom was pulling out of the driveway, he reached behind his seat and handed me a beer, grabbed a second one for himself, opened it, placed it between his legs. They had obviously been to this Chinese restaurant before. Tom and Lena were greeted like old family. "Welcome, Mr. Connors. Here for dinner?" "Yeah, we thought we'd have a bite." We were seated, and Tom reached for the menu, negotiated a few items with Lena, and asked me, "Anything in particular you like, Dunk?" "No, whatever you guys order will be good for me, thanks, Tom." It was a traditional Chinese restaurant serving traditional food, as I expected from the decor and the other clientele. Finally, after we finished the first course, Tom leaned over and asked, "Is Whiskey Jack playing much these days?" "Yeah, we get together from time to time. There's a club downtown that we play at fairly regularly. I don't think you've seen us, have you, Tom?" "No, just on the Tommy Hunter show. I'd watch that once in a while. I'm thinking of recording an album next spring, and I'm looking for some musicians to help. Do you think you could get the boys together for this? And maybe a tour?" Before he even finished the sentence, I knew I was going to do this. "Yeah, I think that's a definite possibility, Tom. I'd have to call the band and find out their schedules. When do you want to do this?" I asked. Actually, I think I was babbling. I was trying to stay calm and businesslike, but I don't think I was doing a very good job of it. "Can I get back to you in a week or so?" "Sure," said Tom. "That's fine. Talk to Brian," Edwards, Tom's manager. "He'll tell you more about the pay and all that stuff. I'll get him to call you." We finished dinner, drove back to Tom's place. He wanted me to come back into the house, but I told him, "I have to get home, Tom. I've been gone all day, and my wife is probably wondering where I am." What I really wanted to do was start calling the band before it got too late. I knew everyone's situation was fairly flexible, and I felt sure I could make this happen.